Libra. At some point in life, many people begin to quietly ask themselves, am I really living in alignment with how I truly feel? Or am I just trying to keep everything looking okay so other people can feel comfortable? Libra often grows up with the ability to read the emotional atmosphere around them very quickly. You know when it is better to stay quiet, when it is better to soften your voice, when it is better to put someone else's needs first. But as you grow a little older, you may begin to notice something unexpected. Real emotional growth does not always come from trying harder. Sometimes, it comes from stopping the effort in places that no longer feel right for you. Recently, if you have noticed yourself reacting less quickly to everything around you, if you feel like you observe more, and instead of stepping into every tension around you, if you notice that emotional steadiness feels more important than proving you are right in every situation, that may be telling a deeper story. A story about how you are changing the way you stand in this world. And maybe that journey begins with something very familiar to Libra. The moment you realize you have spent a long time using your energy to keep everything balanced for everyone else. If you are a Libra, there is a good chance you have become used to being the person who keeps things looking steady in other people's eyes. Not because you are weak, and not because you lack your own opinions. It is simply that from a very early age, you learned how to understand how other people feel. You can sense when the atmosphere in a room becomes tense. You know when it is better to say less to keep the peace. And over time, that slowly becomes part of how you move through the world. Many Libras grow up carrying a very familiar role. The peacemaker, the one standing in the middle, the one trying to see the good in every side. And that is beautiful, deeply human. But there are also days when you may feel like you are carrying the emotions of too many people at once. You smile. You say everything is fine. You stay kind. But deep inside, you may feel tired in a way that is hard to explain. Growth does not always come from dramatic turning points. Sometimes it shows up in very ordinary moments. A morning when you wake up and realize you no longer want to spend so much time worrying about what someone thinks of you. A conversation where you stop carefully choosing every word just to avoid upsetting someone. A day when you allow yourself to rest without feeling guilty for it. Changes like these rarely get attention, but they often carry deeper meaning than we first realize. There are phases when Libra begins to see that trying to keep peace for everyone can sometimes mean forgetting to keep peace within yourself. And realizing this does not make you selfish. It simply means you are learning to treat your own heart fairly, the same way you have always tried to treat others fairly. The world needs people who listen, people who understand, people who know how to connect. But the world also needs people who know how to take care of their inner world. Because when someone lives honestly with their own emotions, they often spread authenticity very naturally to the people around them. Recently, you may have noticed changes that are hard to name. You do not react immediately to every stressful situation anymore. You observe more. You think a little longer before speaking. You start to understand that you do not have to be present in every argument. You do not have to prove that you are right all the time. And you do not have to carry the responsibility of keeping everyone happy. This does not make you weaker. If anything, it often shows emotional growth. In the journey of a Libra, one of the deepest lessons may be learning that real balance is not always found outside of you. It lives in your ability to stand in your values, even when no one is watching. It lives in allowing yourself to have imperfect days. It lives in understanding that you also deserve care, respect, and patience, the same way you have always given those things to others. The world often encourages us to move faster, do more, become the version other people expect. But sometimes, the deepest human value comes from pausing and asking yourself what you truly feel. When a Libra learns to listen to themselves, they often become a quiet source of inspiration for the people around them. Not through loud words, but through steadiness in the way they face life. You may not realize it, but every time you choose honesty instead of trying to please everyone, you create a positive impact. You show others that kindness does not mean abandoning yourself. You show that emotional maturity is a very steady form of strength. And you show that a person can live with deep compassion without sacrificing inner peace. Maybe the road ahead is no longer about trying to keep everything balanced for everyone. Maybe it is about learning how to stand in a place where you no longer have to strain just to be accepted. And from that place, you may begin to look back at the path you have walked and see how much energy you once used trying to keep the world around you from shifting out of its familiar order. In many people's lives, major turning points are usually remembered through very clear milestones: an important decision, a meeting that changes direction, an event that forces everything to rearrange itself. But for Libra, growth often begins in a much more subtle way. It can feel like the change of light at the end of the day, or when you cannot point to the exact moment sunset begins, but you can still feel that the atmosphere has shifted. One of the first things you may notice is that your emotional rhythm starts to change. Not because you are becoming cold, not because you care less about people. It is simply that you no longer allow every outside wave to move straight through you the way it once did. Stories that once stayed in your mind all day may now pass by like a soft breeze. Words that once made you overthink may no longer stay in your thoughts for long. Sometimes, this change shows up in how you use your energy. You start paying attention to who you spend time with. You notice that some conversations leave you feeling stronger, while others leave you drained, even if they only last a few minutes. And instead of trying to maintain every connection, you begin to choose, not to separate yourself from the world, but to keep your inner world steady and strong. Libra often senses emotional shifts very early. You can walk into a space and immediately feel whether it is comfortable for you or not. You can hear sincerity in someone's voice, even when they say very little. And when you notice yourself naturally moving toward environments that make you feel more at ease, that can sometimes be a sign that you are growing in a very natural way. Some changes cannot be seen from the outside. They happen in the way you think about yourself. You may stop asking questions like, am I doing well enough? Are people satisfied with me? Should I become an easier version of myself for others to accept? Instead, you begin asking different questions. What makes my life feel meaningful? What makes me feel honest with who I am? What makes me feel peaceful, even when I am alone? This is not a journey away from the world. It is more like learning how to stand in the world with a stronger foundation. When you understand your value more clearly, you often become more patient with others. When you stop trying to prove you are worthy, you often listen more deeply. And when you feel full from within, you often give without feeling like you are losing something. Modern society sometimes makes us believe that change must come with big explosions. But there is another kind of change, quiet, steady, lasting. It shows up when you realize you do not need to join every story just to feel like you belong. It shows up when you understand that silence can sometimes be emotional wisdom. Yes, it shows up when you feel at peace with the fact that not everyone will fully understand you. You may not have words yet for what is happening inside you, and that is completely normal. Not every phase of growth needs to be named right away. Sometimes it is enough to notice that the way you see life is changing. The way you respond to the world is changing, and the way you treat yourself is changing too. And sometimes that journey begins with one very simple realization: that some things that once took so much of your energy no longer carry the same weight. And from that point, you may begin to look back at the road you have walked and ask yourself what truly deserves to stay with you in the next chapters of your life. At a certain stage in the journey of growing up, many Libras begin to look back at the things they once held on to very tightly. Relationships you poured so much emotion into, goals you chased simply because you believed you were supposed to, roles you stepped into, even when deep down you felt like you had to become a different version of yourself just to be accepted. And then you begin to notice something very quiet but very real. Not everything you fought to hold on to was truly meant for you. This moment is usually not dramatic. It does not feel like a door slamming shut in front of you. It feels more like standing in front of a familiar road. But for the first time, you pause and ask yourself, do I really want to keep walking this path? You may no longer feel the need to prove you are good enough to stay. You may also stop feeling like you have to continue something just because you already invested so much time or so much emotion into it. This is not giving up. It feels more like you are starting to respect the truth inside yourself. Libra often carries a very open heart. You can see the good potential in others, even when they cannot see it in themselves yet. You can be patient with what is unfinished. You can give deeply without keeping score. But over time, you begin to understand something important. Genuine care should not make you feel lost inside your own life. A healthy relationship should not require you to shrink who you are. The right environment should not make you question your worth every single day. Some doors close not to punish you. Sometimes, they simply help you stop before you walk too far down a path that was never truly yours. Looking back, many people realize that what they once called loss became one of the most important turning points in their lives. Not because everything became perfect afterward, but because they began to understand who they really are and what kind of environment they deserve to live in. As Libra matures, you often develop a very deep emotional intelligence. You do not need to cut the world off just to protect yourself. You simply learn how to step back when you feel your inner balance starting to slip. You do not become distant. You become clearer. You do not close your heart. You simply choose to open it in places where respect and sincerity exist. There is a big difference between letting go and becoming indifferent. Now, letting go usually comes from understanding, from accepting that not everyone can walk beside you through every phase of your life, from allowing yourself to step into a new chapter without needing to carry everything from the previous one. And this takes real courage, because Libra is naturally wired to maintain connection. But when you do learn this, you often feel lighter in a way that feels emotionally mature, not empty. In society, people who know when to continue and when to pause often create a very positive kind of impact. They do not live in resentment. They do not spend their energy proving who is right or wrong. They simply choose to live in alignment with their values. And when someone lives that way, they often create a safe space where others feel free to be honest about who they are too. Maybe you were in a phase where you were starting to look back at the things you once chased through a new lens. You are no longer asking, how do I hold on to everything? You begin asking, what is truly worth my time, my emotion, my energy? And from that moment, your path slowly begins to change. Not in a way where you are losing something, but in a way where you are moving closer to the version of yourself you have quietly been growing toward all along. And after you slowly set down the things that no longer feel right for you, a new question often begins to rise very naturally. If I am no longer responsible for holding everything together for the outside world, how do I begin caring for the world inside of me? For many Libras, this becomes a very unique phase of life. It is not dramatic, it does not need recognition, but it feels deeply real. You begin to look at yourself with the same patience you once gave so freely to others. For many years, you may have been used to noticing everyone else's needs before even thinking about your own. You may have learned to adjust your emotions so no one feels uncomfortable. You may have spent a lot of time trying to keep everything running smoothly. And that says a lot about your ability to connect deeply with people in community. But as you step into a more emotionally mature phase, you may begin to understand something important. Taking care of your inner world does not reduce your kindness. If anything, it makes your kindness stronger and more sustainable. Some of the changes may look very simple, but they carry deep meaning. You begin paying attention to your sleep. You notice that when your body is rested, your mind feels clearer, your emotions feel more steady. You begin respecting your tiredness instead of pushing through it just because you feel responsible. You begin to understand that a person can only keep giving in a healthy way when they know how to restore their own energy. You may also start to realize that saying no is not always rejecting someone else. Sometimes it is the way you say yes to what truly matters in your life. When you say no to a schedule that drains you, you are saying yes to your health. When you say no to a conversation that overwhelms you, you are saying yes to your emotional stability. These choices are not always easy, especially for a Libra who is used to putting shared harmony first. But every time you choose based on what feels true inside you, you are building a stronger foundation for your future. It's one of the deepest shifts is often the moment you stop carrying guilt for prioritizing yourself when you truly need to. You begin to understand that caring for yourself does not make you less caring toward others. It actually allows you to be more fully present with them. A person living in constant exhaustion rarely has the energy to truly listen. A person who constantly ignores their own needs often struggles to maintain long-term balance in relationships. Society sometimes sends the message that a person's value is measured by how much they can sacrifice. But there is another perspective, more human, more sustainable. A person who knows how to care for their inner world often becomes a stable source of energy for the people around them. They do not give from pressure. They give from fullness. And when kindness comes from fullness, it often travels farther, lasts longer, and reaches deeper. When Libra learns how to stand strong inside themselves, they often create a natural sense of safety for the people around them. Not because you are trying to do that, but because your inner steadiness becomes a foundation. People can feel that you are no longer living under the pressure of trying to please everyone. And sometimes that gives them permission to relax and be more honest about who they are too. This phase may not immediately create big changes on the outside, but it may bring something deeper, a quiet sense that you are slowly returning to yourself, that you do not have to become the most easily accepted version of yourself. You only need to become the most honest version of yourself. And from that place, the way you show up in relationships, in work, and in daily life often begins to shift naturally. Maybe the road ahead is no longer about keeping everything balanced at any cost. Maybe it is becoming a journey where you first learn to stand steady inside yourself, and then bring that steadiness into the world around you. And from that very deep place, you may begin to see that true emotional maturity is not about how much you can endure. It is about understanding what you truly need to keep walking forward in a healthy and lasting way. When a Libra slowly steps out of the cycle of constantly searching for validation from the outside world, a very deep kind of shift often begins to happen. Not the kind of change where everything suddenly becomes perfect, but more like you begin to see the world through a different set of eyes. In the past, you may have asked yourself, what do I need to do to be accepted, to be loved, to be seen as good enough? But at some point, that question slowly changes into something else. What way of living actually feels true for me? And sometimes, just that small shift in the question can change so many parts of your life. When you stop trying to become the most easily accepted version of yourself, you often begin to show your true self more naturally. You speak your thoughts with respect, but without over-editing yourself. You express real emotions without feeling like you are doing something wrong. You stop feeling like you have to fit into every environment. And interestingly, when you stop trying to blend into every place, you often begin to discover the places that truly fit you. Sometimes, this shows up through opportunities that appear very naturally, not because you suddenly work longer hours, not because you push harder to prove your worth, but because the way you show up in the world changes. You become clearer about what you accept. You become more honest about what you are no longer willing to tolerate. And when your emotional boundaries become more defined, the environments that do not align often begin to fall away on their own, while the environments that do align slowly begin to open. This can also show up in relationships. You may notice you are connecting with people who respect you when you are simply being yourself. People who do not expect you to hide your emotions. People who do not make you feel like you constantly have to prove your worth. Connections like this are often not dramatic, not loud, but they create a strong sense of emotional safety. And over time, you may realize these relationships nourish you in a very steady way. There is something deeply human about this phase. When someone lives honestly with their values, they often give others silent permission to do the same. You do not have to teach anyone a lesson. You simply live in a way that feels true to you. And sometimes, that presence alone is enough to inspire the people around you. Society needs people like this. Not people trying to be perfect, but people trying to live meaningful lives while taking responsibility for their emotional world. Many people once believed that if they stopped trying to please the world, they would lose opportunities, lose connection, lose recognition. But many life experiences show something different. When you stop lowering your value just to stay in a certain environment, you often begin to find places where you do not have to shrink yourself. And in those places, you often grow in a way that feels natural and lasting. This is not magic, and it is not a reward reserved for special people. It is often just the natural result of living closer to who you really are. When you stop trying to become the version you think others want, you release a huge amount of energy, and that energy often flows toward what truly gives your life meaning. You may begin to realize you do not have to move faster to catch up with anyone. You do not have to compare your journey to someone else's. You only need to walk at the rhythm that allows you to feel steady. And over time, you may look back and see that the opportunities, the people, And the environments that appear in your life often reflect how you are treating yourself. Maybe this journey is not about becoming a completely different person. Maybe it is simply about becoming yourself more fully. And from that place, life often begins to reflect back what you have been quietly building inside yourself for a very long time. When you reach this part of the journey, many Libras do not feel like they are stepping into a new chapter the way movies usually show it. There is no moment where everything changes overnight. No dramatic sense of victory. No obvious milestone that clearly marks the transition. Instead, what you may feel is much more subtle. A kind of steadiness begins to appear in your thoughts. A feeling that you are no longer being pulled by as many worries as before. A quiet trust that you can handle what life brings, one step at a time. You may notice you are no longer spending so much time imagining the worst possible outcomes. You may stop feeling like you have to control every result. You begin to accept that some things need time to unfold on their own. This does not mean you are giving up responsibility for your life. It simply means you are learning how to move with life instead of trying to force everything into a perfect plan. And when you live this way, you often feel less tension, less fear, less pressure to prove something to the world. Some stages of growth are not marked by external achievements. They are marked by growth in the way you speak to yourself. You may stop talking to yourself through constant criticism. You may stop comparing your journey to other people's journeys as much as you once did. You begin treating yourself with patience, the same patience you once gave to the people you love. And even though no one else may see this, it can completely change the way you walk through life every single day. You may also notice you no longer feel pressure to become some ideal version just to be accepted. You begin to feel that being yourself with your strengths and with the parts that are still learning is enough. And from that acceptance, you often become more open to life, more open to learning, more open to growth, more open to change when it is needed, but without the feeling that you must chase a standard that causes you to lose yourself. In society, people who develop inner stability often create a very lasting kind of influence. They do not need to speak loudly about life philosophy. They simply live in a way that makes others feel safe around them. They listen without judging. They support without controlling. And they show that real strength sometimes lives in emotional steadiness, not in how strong you appear on the outside. This phase of life may not be marked by big visible changes that others can easily see, but it may be the time when you build a very strong foundation for the years ahead. A foundation built on self-understanding, built on respecting your own emotions, built on trusting that you do not need to become someone else to deserve a meaningful life. Looking back, many people realize that the most important chapters of their lives were not the ones that looked the brightest from the outside. They were the ones where they began to feel stable from within, the ones where they stopped being controlled by the fear of losing validation, the ones where they understood that their value does not depend on how others see them in every single moment. If you are in a phase where life feels like it is slowing down in a way that helps you think more clearly, helps you listen to yourself more deeply, that may not be a sign that you are falling behind. Sometimes it is simply a sign that you are stepping into a rhythm of life that fits who you truly are. And this journey does not require you to become perfect. It simply invites you to keep walking forward with honesty, with kindness, and with respect for yourself. The road ahead may still hold challenges, but when you learn how to stand strong inside yourself, you often stop feeling like you have to face life completely alone. You carry your experiences, your lessons, your understanding, everything you have gathered through every phase you have lived. And sometimes that is already enough for you to keep moving forward with a steadiness that is deep, real, and uniquely yours.